Hola amigos de GuitarraMX, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos una vez más a un programa de Conectado. Hace mucho que no me veían por acá, pero hoy entré a tirar paro a mis queridos amigos de Conectado, a Santiago, a Derek y a Edu, porque, pues bueno, por temas de lluvia y cuestiones no se han podido conectar todavía, pero tenemos a Edu, al buen Edu Bueno, tras bambalinas esperando conectarse. Hoy tenemos la continuación del programa de HELIX con los especialistas Nick y Eric, que ya los tuvimos semanas atrás con nosotros, y obviamente Edu llevando el control del programa absolutamente. Yo voy a estar tras bambalinas, no me van a ver, pero bueno, voy a estar ahí contestando los mensajes del público. Así que, pues, demos de una bienvenida. Acá vamos a activarlo.
Hola Rick,
¿Cómo estás tú?
¿cómo te va? Aquí pues
¿Cómo va todo?
emocionado, está mandando mensaje Santiago que ya está abriendo su browser, no debe tardar en conectarse. Y bueno, pues
Perfecto.
ahora sí que emocionado, ya está Eric atrás, entonces pues vamos a esperar que se empiece a conectar la banda, ya está Fernando García. Hola Fernando. Y bueno, pues hoy vamos a manejar, digo, obviamente va a ser similar al programa pasado con Eric Klein de Line 6. Y algo que sería, creo que importante hacer notar a Eric y a toda la gente de Line 6, porque nos está viendo más gente de Line 6 en este momento, que la gente ponga el típico saludos desde México, saludos desde Perú, saludos desde donde sea, para que vayan viendo en dónde están viendo el programa. ¿Sí? Y bueno,
Sí.
yo ya
Es
tengo
es muy
pues...
importante que pongan de dónde nos visitan, sobre todo porque tenemos a Eric, Eric y Nick, especialistas, y que bueno, parte de la intención del programa pues es estar por acá.
Claro, ya se conectó
Conversando
Mariana Castillo.
posturas.
Hola Mariana. Y sí, sí es muy importante porque obviamente Line 6 es una marca que tiene, pues ya se globalizó, ¿no? Ya tiene distribución en todo el planeta, en todo el mundo, ya el medio guitarrístico ya saben quién es Line 6, qué es Line 6, ¿sí? Y bueno, obviamente pues tenemos que aclarar GuitarraMX no tiene un convenio ni exclusividad con Line 6, obviamente, ¿sí? Nosotros como revista, pues obviamente estamos mostrándole a la gente los productos y y pues sí, ahora sí que aquí por el contacto que yo tuve hace un par de años con la marca, por situaciones laborales, y porque me apasiona a mí esta marca, la verdad, pues se lanzó el reto aquí de voy a hacer lo posible por traer a alguien, y alguien dijo no prometan nada que no sea, y yo así de hijo, me pegaron en el orgullo y esa misma noche empecé a mandar mensajes y
El orgullo, ¿no?
sí, sí,
Sí,
esa misma noche
sí,
contacté
sí.
a Nick y y al día siguiente ya empezamos las pláticas para todos estos encuentros, ¿sí? Alfredito, Chavero, hermano, este, Rick se escucha un poco cortado, dice Alfredo que te escuchas un poquito cortado, pero bueno, pues bueno, vamos a pasar a Igor Lugo, vamos a pasar a Eric. No debe tardar en conectarse también Santiago. Las mascotas de Guitarra MX Chicharrón, ya tiene hermanito, lo voy a presentar la siguiente semana, porque hoy tenemos un invitado que, pues, ahora sí, para no distraer la atención y que nos digan en qué programa me invitaron, ¿no? La semana que entra les presento al compañerito nuevo de Chicharrón. Y bueno, pues vámonos a pasar a Eric
Com-
Klein, ¿ok?
compa-
Ahora sí que no te me pierdas, Rick, y en cuanto llegue Santiago,
sí.
pues que nos acompañe
Vamos
también.
a ver si le pongamos la cortinilla le ponemos la cortinilla de invitado para darle como se merece al buen Eric
Claro que sí.
en lo que se conecta muy bien.
Adelante.
Como se chispó ahí, no sé qué pasó.
Hola,
Bienvenido,
¿qué
Eric.
pasa?
Hello, amigo Eric. So, ok.
Pero
Rick
bueno,
is
les dejo
going
lo que
to
ustedes. Yo me
stay.
quedo por aquí atrás.
Okay, Rick is going to stay backstage,
Okay.
and Santiago is about to join us in a few minutes. So let's get started, my friend.
Do it.
Fernando Garcia says, Line 6,
Yeah,
bring
Helix.
me a Helix.
What's your address? Send it me. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's
Fernando.
your address and social security number and
Yeah. Fernando, tú ya sabes que pagando. Okay, Eric, I am telling our audience, our friends who are watching this program, to tell where are they located in Mexico or any other place in Latin America, so you know where are they located. And I
Great.
know there are some other guys from Line 6 watching us right now, so they can have an idea where are these people located, okay? Y bueno, banda, díganos en dónde están ubicados para que nuestros amigos de Line 6 sepan en dónde están ubicados. Y claro, manden sus preguntas. Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta para Eric, por favor pónganla en el chat, en español o en inglés, y aquí vamos a estar respondiendo y traduciendo todas sus preguntas. Okay, Eric, I want to start with my first question.
all right. Here we go.
Okay. It's an easy question. Last time we talked with you a couple of weeks ago, you told us that you started selling keyboards at a local music store.
Yes.
Okay. I want to know, and I think that because you're working for Line 6, we all want to know if you play guitar or play some other instruments or play just keyboards, multi-instruments, or you don't play but you just dedicated to programming computer and designing all those devices.
I'm a hack regardless. So I took 8 years of classical piano when I was a kid,
Okay.
starting at age 5. So and then, but I always wanted to play guitar. My parents said, "No, you got to play piano." I was like,
Oh,
this is stupid. I want to play guitar. And then I finally got to play guitar, and then I got the recording bug. It's like, well, now I have to learn how to play bass and synthesizer and drum machines and all of these things, so I can record all of these things, so I
Yes.
can make the entire music myself. So then I ended up doing more production. So I can play just well enough to get those instruments into the computer, and then I chop them up to make people think that I'm better than I am. So
All right. Ok, pues le acabo de preguntar a Eric, la semana pasada nos comentó que él comenzó en la industria de la música vendiendo sintetizadores, y pues mi pregunta fue, trabajando en Line 6, si él toca guitarra o solo toca teclados o si toca diferentes instrumentos, y me comenta que pues sí, que empezó a la edad de 5 años tomando clases de piano clásico por 8 años, y que él quería tocar guitarra, pero le dijeron, no, toca piano, y así de, no, primero él guitarra, y bueno, pues ya, tiempo después empezó a tocar guitarra y pues ya dijo, ya tengo mi grabadora, pues voy a tocar bajo, voy a tocar batería, teclado, bueno, batería no mencionó, pero teclado, y que él quería grabar todos esos instrumentos. Okay, there's the first question from the audience, and it's from my good friend Carolo666, who is a really good friend of mine for a long time ago. He's asking if there's going to be a new Variax update in the near future.
not in the near future, no, I'm sorry to say. Variax is really difficult to sell, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you walk into like in America, we have Guitar Center. So if you walk
Yes.
into Guitar Center and you see all of the guitars, and then you're like, "Where's the Variax guitars?" So there's a really small chance that they're going to have the body style you want, or the color you want, or the pickup configuration you want. And convincing a Guitar Center or a music store to carry more than one Variax is very difficult.
Yes.
So Variax is really sort of a labor of love for us. I don't know if that translates. It's something we don't make a lot of money on, and we do mainly because we want to do it and we love doing it. But it doesn't. It's not a terribly successful product compared to something like Helix or DL4 Mark II or Catalyst or something like that. We do it because we love it, not because. So it's a little difficult to warrant putting a lot of effort into constantly improving things or constant updates for Variax. We would love to, but we're looking at the future of Variax and where we want to go with it, and it's there are all sorts of really cool ideas we have planned for it, but I don't think people are going to see any of that for a while.
Yes, I know. Okay, let me translate this.
Sorry.
Okay. Mi buen amigo Carolo, como ya vieron en el chat, preguntó si habrá un update para las guitarras Variax. Sí, puso Carolo la JTB, que es la James Tyler Variax, pero bueno, en general es el mismo sistema ya de la JTB, la Variax Standard o Shuriken. Y me comenta Eric que no habrá un update próximamente, así cercano, en el futuro, debido a que no están enfocados en el desarrollo de ese producto, porque Variax no es el producto exitoso, que si uno entra a un Guitar Center donde hay una pared con cientos y cientos de guitarras, y si te pones a buscar una Variax, seguramente encontrarás solo una. Y ahí ya depende mucho de que encuentres el modelo que estás buscando, el color que estás buscando, la configuración de pastillas que uno está buscando, y ahí se vuelve un poco más complicado. Obviamente el mercado para Variax, y bueno, Variax es la guitarra de modelaje, quienes no la conozcan. Aquí yo tengo mi Variax JTB. Es la guitarra de modelaje que nos da diferentes modelos de guitarras y cambiamos afinaciones también sin tener que mover las perillas, ¿sí? Entonces es un instrumento increíble, impresionante, pero el mercado es reducido y el instrumento pues también no es con el precio que puede costar una guitarra económica, ¿sí? Pero bueno, esto es lo que me viene diciendo Eric sobre el upgrade de guitarras Variax. There's another question. Igor Lugo, how can I contribute to line 6? I'm working on statistical analyst. Okay. There's the question from Igor Lugo.
I'll tell you what, if you want to, Igor, forward your resume and CV to Edu, and then he'll send it to me, and I'll make sure that the right people see it.
Okay. Igor Lugo, ahí está la primera respuesta, brother. Mándame tu currículum. En unos minutos estará apareciendo también aquí abajo mi correo. Si no, te escribo y nos lo mandamos. Mándame tu currículum y se lo hago llegar a Eric para que él lo haga llegar a las personas adecuadas en Line 6. Okay. Well, another question about the Variax. Ahí está mi correo, Igor. About the Variax. Here's my my cable, my Line 6 Variax digital cable.
Yep.
Okay. A lot of people are telling me, do I need to buy the Line 6 cable, or can I use any Ethernet cable?
You can use any Ethernet cable. It has to be. Don't quote me. It has to be Cat 6, Cat 5, Cat 6. I don't know. I would say in a pinch you can use any Ethernet cable.
Okay.
There's nothing really special about it. You want to use a high quality version. I wouldn't. They're going to break off if you don't have the EtherCon connector.
The protection.
But if you get any EtherCon cable will work. I don't think they even make the bad ones for EtherCon. The only advantage to EtherCon jacks, though, are just the more robust ends. Other than that, the data is exactly the same.
Ok,
The signals are exactly the same.
ok. Le pregunté a Eric, estas guitarras Variax. I'm going to show the connection of the guitar. La guitarra Variax trae un conector con una protección, con una buena protección. Ay, a ver si se alcanza a ver. Y el cable que usa es básicamente con un pin de cable Ethernet, ¿sí? Entonces, esta guitarra lo que manda no es como un cable de plug o un XLR, esto manda información, que en muchos casos, en estos casos, se traduce en un código binario, ¿sí? Pero bueno, el cable, ahí está un HELIX con el input, y este es el cable con el conector Ethernet. Y me comenta Eric que la pregunta fue si es necesario usar el cable a fuerzas del cable Line 6 o si se puede usar un cable Ethernet. Me comenta Eric que se recomienda que sea un cable de buena calidad, que no recuerda si es de 4, 5 o 6 pins lo recomendado, pero que no hay problema, que se puede usar un cable. Obviamente se corre el riesgo, como aquí viene protegido, como si fuera un cable XLR, un cable Ethernet no trae esta protección. Y pues bueno, se corre el riesgo de que se rompa, pero sí se puede usar un cable Ethernet con la guitarra Variax. Ok, banda, vayan poniendo sus preguntas en el chat, ok. Um, about Helix, my friend.
Yes.
Helix Native.
Yes.
Are you involved in developing the software that is now known as Helix Native?
I'm not. I don't develop or code anything. I'm just a designer,
Okay.
product manager, strategy guy, overseeing design and that sort of thing. It was really important from the beginning that we made a plug-in version of Helix.
Yes.
That so musicians could take they're in the studio and they're making their record. And there's so many records that were made with Amp Farm back in the day and Echo Farm on Pro Tools.
Yes.
Line 6 was the first company to do any type of instrument type effects or a guitar type effects in a plugin format. That was back in '99, I think.
Okay.
It was Amp Farm. But we wanted anybody who is in the studio making tones with plugins in their computer, instead of having to spend weeks trying to recreate the sounds of their record and put them into their processors and go on the road. And a lot of bands, like bigger bands, will hire people and spend thousands of dollars, and they'll spend weeks recreating album sounds into processors, into Axe-Fx, into Kemper, into Helix, things like that. But if you have Helix Native as your plugin, it takes 5 seconds. Yes. All of your tones from the album are now in on stage. And then when you're in a hotel room, or if you're on the bus, or if you're on a friend's couch, depending on how big a band you are, you're writing songs for the next record and you're using Helix or using HX Star. You don't have to figure out what you did when you go back to the studio. It all ports in the studio in 5 seconds again. So the whole note from studio to stage and back was really important to us. And so we think of Helix Native as an intrinsic part of the Helix family. So.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Let me translate this, guys. Okay. Bueno, hice la pregunta sobre Helix Native. Helix Native es el plugin de Helix para producción en estudio, ¿sí? Si no tienes el Helix en físico, pero compraste y adquiriste el plugin de Helix en tu computadora, tienes todo el poder de Helix, ¿sí? Y bueno, le pregunté si él está involucrado en el desarrollo de Helix Native, me dijo que no, pero me estuvo comentando que Line 6 fue la primera empresa en desarrollar un plugin donde venía ya todo envuelto el proceso era Amp Farm. Is that Amp Farm, the plugin you mentioned?
That was the early one, yeah, from 99, yeah.
Ok, en 1999 Line 6 desarrolló Amp Farm, que fue el primer plugin donde ya la gente podía estar grabando y y usando todo el contenido de los procesadores Line 6 en un solo plugin, y pues era muy sencillo que la gente llegara con su computadora y tenía al instante el sonido de los productos Line 6. Y ahora con Helix Native, pues no importa si tienes el HX Stomp o si tienes un Helix LT o Helix Floor, transportas tus presets a Helix Native y en 5 segundos tienes el sonido que usas en vivo o con el que hayas grabado previamente y puedes seguir haciendo tu producción. ¡Hey, Santiago!
Santiago!
Hi, good night.
Hola.
Eric, thank you for being with us again. Edu, good night. Sorry I'm late.
Hola.
By the way, Derek is telling us in a little message, hi to everyone. Sorry for missing the show. He couldn't be here. But Derek welcomes you, Eric, to the show again. And Derek says, you're in great hands with Edu. So welcome again. Okay, I'm here to support, to join, but Edu is doing a great job conducting, so carry on, please.
Okay, hay una pregunta aquí de Fernando García. There's a question from Fernando Garcia, and he says, if I buy Helix Native, the latency is resolved or is a heavy preset?
So latency is not determined necessarily by the DSP, by the plugin.
Yes.
It's very, very small. There is some latency with polyphonic pitch shifting and that sort of thing, but there is everywhere, no matter what you use.
Yes.
For the most part, the DSP is optimized to be super fast because it's designed for the hardware. And the full throughput latency from going from the input, converting to digital, going through all of the blocks, and then back out is less than 2 milliseconds.
Yes.
So super, super fast. So
Yes.
if you have a really, really fast optimized audio interface like an Apogee Symphony, or if you're running like Pro Tools, like TDM systems, like the new TDM systems, or like a Lynx, or any of the higher end audio interfaces where they have dedicated drivers that are super fast, like a Lynx. The Lynx that I'm using has less than 2 milliseconds of latency there as well. So you're going to get about the same if you run a really small buffer. So if your computer is fast enough to run like a 16 buffer, then the latency is just going to be a bit larger than Helix hardware. But if you're running, like a traditional, just regular core audio, like you plug it in and you're running a buffer size of 256 or 512 or something higher, then that contributes to the latency. So it's the audio interface, the driver, the buffer size, all of those have a massive impact on latency, but the DSP in Helix Native is very, very small and very fast.
Yes. Okay, let me translate.
Translation, yes.
Ok, está preguntando aquí Fernando García sobre la latencia en Helix Native, si se soluciona o puede causar algún tipo de problema que sea notoria la latencia. La latencia viene siendo como un pequeño retraso en la señal a la hora de tocar.
Ajá.
Y nos está comentando Eric que con Helix Native es muy reducido, que la latencia es más notoria cuando se usan sonidos polifónicos, y eso viene cuando se usan sonidos básicamente de sintetizadores o cosas por el estilo, ¿sí? Pero que si tienes tú algún, según la plataforma con la que se trabaje, Pro Tools, etcétera, todo eso es configurable, y si en tu máquina lo tienes configurado a un valor bajo, así que a menos de 256 en el buffer, pues la latencia va a estar reducida a 0.2 milisegundos, ¿sí?
O sea,
pero
nada.
no es nada. For example, Eric, I'm using here at home Pro Tools HD, and I have the Helix Native plugin. And to me, it's marvelous using this plugin. I also have my Helix LT and HX stuff, but it's very comfortable for me using this plugin, and I am happy using this Helix native stuff.
Sure. Another, sorry, go ahead, Santiago. Sorry.
Speaking about latency, because it's a word that we hear quite frequently nowadays, because on the specs of many units that are using DSP and modeling. So some say there are people that exist that are latency sensitive or more sensitive to latency.
I am.
And what I'm going to ask you, Eric, is about what is the threshold when you can say the average people could hear or discern latency, maybe 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, I don't know. But in normal parameters for a normal or regular human being, ear and brain, what will be that threshold for the latency to be heard or to be perceived?
It depends on the instrument and it depends on the musician. So I've worked with singers because I did vocal production for many years when I first moved to LA, and I worked with a couple singers who could perceive 5 milliseconds.
Wow.
And we were able to get around it by setting up a monitor mix in analog, which removed that section. And that's rare. Like most professional singers want to have 10 milliseconds or lower. Guitarists, you can generally get away with 10, 12, 15 for for most guitarists. Most professional guitarists are fine with that because there's the plucking of a string, there's inherent latency there as well.
Yes.
But with vocals, it's immediate. It's completely immediate. There are all sorts of tricks that you can do, especially if you have Helix hardware. What's nice is that you can set that up so you can monitor the output of Helix while you're recording the signal with no processing into Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase. So what you can do is you can record 2 different tracks. One has the effects built in, and then one it's dry with no effects and no amps. And then if you liked what you played and you think the sound is great, you just keep the first track. But if you screwed up, you can take the dry track that was played with no perceptible latency or less than 2 milliseconds, and then very simply route it back through Helix to reamp, or you run Helix native on it. So you can have 2 tracks, one that has the effects recorded from the hardware, and another track that has Helix native on it, and they'll sound identical or as close to identical can be, but you don't get any of that latency because you're using the hardware for monitoring purposes. Now that's expensive if you're just using it for that. So I don't recommend people buying Helix just to lower your latency, but you can do that if you have hardware.
Thanks. Quite interesting. En español ahora, ¿quién traduce?
Yo traduzco. ¿Cuál fue tu pregunta en específico, Santi?
Pues la latencia, o si quieres yo les digo a la gente, mira, yo le pregunté a Eric, primero que hay ciertas personas que son sensibles, ¿no? A la latencia, ¿no?
A ese retraso.
Sensitive. Y dice Eric, yo mismo soy, o sea, Eric es sensible a la latencia, él puede percibir una latencia muy pequeña. Entonces lo que le pregunté fue, ¿y cuál es el umbral? ¿Cuál es el límite? ¿Dónde están los rangos donde una persona normal, el oído y el cerebro de una persona normal no percibe ninguna latencia, y a partir de qué números, qué valores, la latencia ya la puedes distinguir? Y él me dice que es diferente para cantantes que para guitarristas. Los cantantes tienen más sensibilidad porque finalmente su sonido se produce con la voz, entonces es mucho más directo. Exacto. Si hay un pequeño desfase, lo sienten más. Hay cantantes que pueden percibir una latencia de 5 milisegundos. Y en cambio los guitarristas dicen que están bien con latencias que van de los 10, los 12 hasta los 15 milisegundos. Y vale la pena mencionar que los equipos de HELIX y todos estos equipos están muy por abajo de esos valores, o sea que tienen latencias que son imperceptibles en principio.
Sí, de hecho aquí anda conectado, ya hicimos una pregunta de mi amigo Carolo y y Carolo pues es un productor ya pues con una trayectoria y adquirió Helix en el último semestre y al siguiente día que lo compró me mandó un mensaje así de no manches, latencia cero. A good friend of mine who is right now connected and asking questions. He bought his Helix a couple of months ago, and for the second day using his Helix, he sent me a message telling me this thing is amazing, zero latency. And he was like, no, Helix and all this kind of gear, but right now he's in love with Line 6 and his Helix.
Antes de una siguiente pregunta con Eric dijo otra cosa además, lo de grabar 2 tracks, uno seco y uno con efectos. Si quieres tú coméntalo.
Exacto. Nos comentó Eric ahorita en su respuesta que teniendo Helix, el hardware, un Helix Floor o Helix Rack o Helix LT, que tienes la opción de mandar 2 señales directa a grabación. Una con el proceso y la otra una señal drive para hacer básicamente lo que podría ser ya, digamos un reamping, ¿no? Tu señal en limpio y posteriormente pasarle o el plugin o procesarlo ya sea con amplificador, con lo que sea. Pero bueno, ahí tienes tú, si no quieres tener esa latencia, tienes una señal seca, limpia y con 0 latencia para después poder hacer el proceso que uno quiera hacer. Esto ya es en un entorno de producción.
Exacto.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Aquí dice Alfredo, there's a question from Alfredo Chavero. Basically, he have the tone port 2 interface.
Okay. Where is that?
Does this interface works with Helix Native?
It should. There is something special about tone port 2 in that it came with software that would actually do real-time monitoring through the hardware.
Okay.
So you get very, very low latency if you use tone port 2. That was one of the advantages. Unfortunately, Helix, you can use it with Helix Native, but there's none of that special routing with tone port 2, unfortunately.
Okay, bueno, Alfredo, creo que sí pudiste haber entendido, pero le pregunté le hice tu pregunta y dice que sí se puede. Tone port venía con un software de Line 6 de aquella época y que la única desventaja, o sea, no va a haber latencia, no va a haber mucha latencia, pero que no se puede hacer el ruteo que acabamos de mencionar para grabar las 2 señales con 0 latencia.
Yeah, there is a we do recommend certain things in audio interfaces, whether you're using Helix Native or Guitar Rig or any software, guitar amp plugin software. Generally, you want to have an instrument input at 1 meg ohm impedance.
Okay.
You also ideally you don't want to have any volume control on it. You want to make sure that it always goes in at instrument level input and you're not boosting or cutting it. Because even if you just turn the knob on the input a little bit, it's like adding a boost pedal before your software, which it clearly, and if you turn it up a lot, it's like adding 8 boost pedals. So it's going to sound terrible. So in Helix Native, on the input meter, there's a little gray area that's, I believe, -8 down to -24 dB. And you want to make sure your guitar signal stays around in there, and that's going to give you the best performance. But if you plug it just into any 1/4-inch input and then crank the input and try to get a hot signal, it's going to sound terrible. But that's true with almost any software.
All right. Ok, me está comentando Eric que ellos recomiendan para grabar, ya sea con Helix Native o en cualquier otro software como sea Amplitude o cosas similares, que se use una interfase que no tenga control de volumen, porque eso va a hacer la función de un pedal de boost. O sea, nuestro volumen lo va a levantar, lo va a disparar. Y si tú subes mucho el volumen, pues lo va a levantar 8 o 10 veces o más y va a sonar terrible. Entonces lo recomendado es que la interfase que se use que no tenga control de volumen. Y en lo que es Helix Native, el lector del input que se mantiene en color gris entre los -8 y -12 decibeles, que es lo recomendado para lo que es la captura de grabación de guitarra usando este software. Alright. Vámonos con...
We have more questions.
I have
Alright.
another question about Helix Native.
Okay.
You know,
It's a Helix native night. All right.
it's a Helix Native night. You know, I am a user of Helix Native too, and
I am too. It's actually the only product I use every day.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So cool. You know, okay. The question is, does Line 6 consider to do some kind of a foot controller via USB connection for Helix Native, or is not possible?
So Helix Control, the remote for Helix Rack.
Some kind of foot controller.
Oh yeah, it's the Helix Control for Helix Rack.
Yeah, but
That has
for
US
Helix Native.
That has a USB port on it. That was originally, we wanted to make that as the remote control for Helix Native.
Oh wow.
We just haven't gotten around to it yet. We would love to. It's just on our massive list of things we would love to do. But if there were a remote for Helix Native, it would be Helix Control.
All right. So cool. Bueno, le pregunté si Line 6 ha considerado desarrollar un controlador de piso para Helix Native. Y esto, para que se entienda, Helix Native es el software. El Helix Native está instalado en la computadora. Entonces, el procesador sería que el guitarrista tendría que cargar su computadora y este controlador de piso, esa pedalera, ¿sí? Me dice que lo que es el controlador de piso de Helix Rack, porque Helix Rack viene con Helix Control, que es esta pedalera que nos está mostrando, que esa inicialmente estaba pensada para ser usada con Helix Native y que sí trae una entrada USB para ser usada de esa manera, pero acabó siendo usada con Helix Rack y que es de lo que tiene pues planeado a futuro Line 6 lanzar un controlador para Helix Native. That's very informative for me because I'm thinking about go out and jam using my computer and some kind of controller.
I have to stress, it does not work right now. So
Yeah.
don't go and buy Helix Control thinking it will work with Helix Native. It doesn't.
Okay. No compren el
You want it
controlador
to.
porque no funciona actualmente con Helix Native. Es especialmente para Helix Rack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Edu, maybe we could ask Eric about the HX Stomp.
HX Stomp.
If I'm not wrong, Eric was pretty involved in the creation process of the hugely successful HX Stomp.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we could ask Eric about his advice or recommendation for guitar players to integrate the HX Stomp in their pedal boards or as a standalone unit, or maybe some advice, some tips, interesting tip for HX Stomp users, and I don't know, maybe some interesting data or anecdote about the creation of HX Stomp. No?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of my baby. This was really difficult to make it this small. We at the beginning of every project, typically years before anybody actually sees it in a store, we apply what we call our pillars or laws that the entire team, development, engineering, marketing, sales, it's the three most important things about that product, that the whole project. And the number one thing about HX Stomp is it had to be tiny. It had to be as small as humanly possible. And number two was it had to sound exactly like HELIX. So it couldn't sound, it couldn't be like, we couldn't chimp out, cheese out on the converters or the op amps or any of that stuff, which is why it made it really difficult, because it has 4 circuit boards in here, one of which has 12 layers. I think 2 of them might have 12 layers. So there's a ton of circuitry in this. And I honestly, I forget the third pillar or the third rule, but we spent at least a month doing nothing but going back and forth saying it's got to be smaller, 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 smaller. And then as a joke, somebody put it in the little back pocket in HELIX backpack. So if you see in HELIX backpack, there's a little smaller pocket on the back, and it fits perfectly in that pocket.
Okay.
And it was
all right.
Yes, I have my
total
back.
coincidence. We had no idea.
Okay. So, ¿quieres traducir, Edu? Bueno, en primer lugar, la pregunta es acerca del HX Stomp, que es un producto en el cual Eric tuvo mucho que ver en su concepción y su desarrollo, ¿no? Es
Claro.
su bebé.
Y le preguntaste así alguna anécdota, cosas similares, ¿no? Sobre
Exacto,
en el
incluso
desarrollo.
si nos
Y
puede
bueno,
decir algún consejo sobre cómo usarlo a los guitarristas, ¿no?
Sí, y nos comentó Eric que pues se juntaron los departamentos tanto de marketing como de desarrollo, de diseño, etcétera, para asentar ideas, y que el concepto era que fuera pequeño, smaller,
Tiny.
tiny. Y bueno, y fue lo que se desarrolló. Nos comenta que interiormente hay 12 capas de circuito, 12 tablas de circuito.
Sí,
Y
tiene digamos, tres circuitos, y 2 de ellos tienen 12 capas.
Exacto. Entonces, ahora sí que nos decía, debe ser pequeño, pero lo importante, que debe sonar como HELIX.
Sí,
It
igual.
have to sound just like HELIX, ¿ok? Entonces, pues que eso era lo que trataron de mantener, y que durante el desarrollo mencionó el HELIX backpack, la mochila para HELIX trae un compartimento, y que alguien lo agarró y lo puso en ese compartimento y dijeron, pues sí, este es el tamaño que estamos buscando. Entonces, pues quedó un producto pequeñito en comparación a los procesadores HELIX o HELIX LT, que son bastante más grandes, ¿sí?
Sí, si el público quiere preguntar algo acerca del producto HX Stomp, please do. O sea, the audience maybe could ask something about that. The topic in this very moment is HX Stomp. And one more question simply is, did you expected the huge success of the HX Stomp? Because it's a bestseller. It was an instant hit, as I can recall.
This is going to sound arrogant, but yeah, we knew it was going to be. There were a lot of people at Line 6 who weren't sure. Like, why is it so small? Why is it 3 switches? That's dumb. And it actually originally only had 2 switches, and it was a lot smaller. It was about that big.
Really?
2 switches. But when they crammed all the circuits in, it ended up being like that thick.
Ooh, okay.
So it was obnoxiously tall off the floor. And they're like, Eric, we can't make it any shorter. I'm like, okay, we'll go to 3 switches. And they're like, yes, we can do 3 switches. So, but the thing that Line 6 hadn't done for many, many years was make a product designed for the pedal board. So the M5 was the most recent thing that we had made. That was 2010.
Yeah, Starbucks.
Yeah, but we hadn't done anything really like this. And there were other companies who would say, all right, well, let's take the flagship and make it slightly smaller. And we're like, no, we want a completely different type of guitarist to use HX Stomp. So we purposely designed it for musicians who already have a bunch of pedals. Yeah. And so we wanted it to be pedal board friendly. We wanted it to be, we wanted it to be as small as possible. And it was a coincidence that it's almost identical size to a Strymon, one of the Strymon trifectas. I just had a lunch with Mark from Strymon today. Awesome dude. And when, and as soon as we saw how small it was, right, okay, now it's a pedal. We're going to push this as a pedal. All the photos in the magazines are going to show it on a pedal board with other pedals. So, we reached out to friends at companies. They're like, oh, yeah, put our pedal on the pedal board. That's great. So I think because we really pushed it as a stomp box and not a mini Helix, we think that has a lot to do with why it's been so successful. Okay. It's not just a small modeler. It can be nothing but delays and reverbs. It can be nothing but distortions. It can be nothing but your tuner and your AV routing and your audio interface and your wah pedal, if you want,
Ok, all right. Bueno, pues aquí nos estaba comentando del origen de HX Stomp y nos comentaba que inicialmente iba a ser de este tamaño con 2 switches nada más, ¿sí? Pero que estaba quedando mucho más alto y estaba quedando algo similar a lo que es el procesador M9 que contienen los Stomp Boxes, pero ahí se asignan de uno por uno, ¿sí? Y bueno, el tema fue que dijeron, esto está muy alto, vamos a poner 3 switches en vez de 2, y a la hora de alargarlo se pudo bajar la altura del producto, quedó cómodo a los pies para tenerlo en el piso y poder pisar cómodamente sin levantar tanto el pie, y poder hacer clic en los switches. Y pues ahora sí que ya era más fácil, porque dice que del otro modo solo se podía incluir o los delays o las distorsiones o cosas por el estilo, y al alargarlo ya se pudo incluir todo el contenido que requería ahora sí que en la memoria para poder tener el potencial de un producto de y ser parte principalmente de la familia Helix, ¿sí?
Y que esperaban el éxito, ¿no?
Esperaban el éxito de este producto y pues bueno, ahora sí que pusieron todo el input para el desarrollo, el diseño y la creación del HX Stomp.
Está muy bien. Pues estamos llegando al final del tiempo. ¿Tienes preguntas? Adelante.
Tengo una pregunta más. Déjame ver.
¿En el chat?
Okay. Just by the time that Spider 5 were launched, were you involved in the development of these amplifiers?
Spider 5, I was not the product owner for Spider 5. Okay. I helped with some of the layout and some of the UI.
Okay.
But that wasn't. Oh, I mean, we're all kind of one big family, so we all kind of work on stuff together. But that wasn't my personal project.
Okay.
I have one here though, and I love playing through it. It's a lot of fun.
That's cool.
I love the wireless aspect of it. So
yeah,
I can if I'm in the middle of a meeting, I can walk around with my guitar. I can have one ear. So
yeah, that's very cool from this line of Spider. My question, that was our first question, but my main question is there any plan in the future to do a new generation of Spider amps, but now including the power of a Helix?
I don't think it's going to be called Spider. Spiders generally, from a branding standpoint, are meant to be more practice amps, affordable practice amps.
Yeah.
So putting, so to make it affordable, we can't put in like super expensive Celestion drivers and boutique plywood cabinets that are perfectly tuned acoustically. It's expensive to do that.
Yeah.
So and anything that's worthy of Helix modeling, we'd want to put it in as good a cabinet as possible. And we've talked about a Helix-based amp for a long, long time. and and if we were to do like the full engine of Helix in an amp that's worthy of that, it's well over $2,000.
All right.
So the market for US dollars, so the market for $2,000 digital amps is tiny.
Yes, I know.
However, the Catalyst amp that we announced in April and has been really successful as well, that does have a lot of Helix stuff in it, but it doesn't have the full Helix engine. So the signal path is kind of fixed. You get a smaller subset of effects, and the amps are designed by the Helix sound design team. So Ben, Sam, and Ryan, and they're all Line 6 originals. And they don't take up notably less DSP than the other amps in Helix, but they were designed specifically for Catalyst and that cabinet and those speakers. So they're tuned kind of specifically for that particular amplifier, but it's about as close to a Helix amp as you're going to get.
All right.
Okay.
Bueno, mi pregunta fue, I'm going to translate this. Le pregunté a Eric si había algún plan de desarrollar algún amplificador que incluya básicamente el contenido de Helix, ¿sí? Y me comenta que en el mundo de los amplificadores digitales, desarrollar un amplificador con todo el contenido de Helix, pues de este amplificador de americanos. Entonces, y que ese mercado es muy reducido. Entonces, me comenta que por ahora pues no es lo que están trabajando, pero que este año lanzaron lo que es el amplificador Catalyst, el cual fue desarrollado por parte del equipo que ha desarrollado Helix. Y Catalyst lo que incluye son modelos de amplificadores desarrollados que están incluidos en Helix, pero que en la parte de efectos pues básicamente está muy reducido, y yo ya lo probé. Lo que se incluye ahí es reverb. The Catalyst have reverb on this amp.
Yep.
But it doesn't have all these, modulations and pitch shifters and stuff like that. So
no, it
whole
has
bunch
mods.
of effects. No.
Yeah, it has mods and delays and pitch shifts and reverbs and boosts, and like the boost is tied to the amp. It's actually built into the model of the amp, which is something unique. It's not before the amp; it's built into it. So it's almost like Ben and Sam and Ryan, they actually built virtual amps and built a boost circuit in the virtual amp, and so it's part of that. Okay. But the modeling itself is Helix. So if you were to run like HX Stomp into and use very similar amps and similar effects and run it into the effects return in the back, you would get a very similar sound.
All right.
Okay. No, that's nice. Si quieres traducir para el público.
Va. Bueno, me comenta que Catalyst, sí, la parte de efectos está reducida. Yo lo probé y pues en control solo viene el reverb, pero pues, nos está dando a entender que sí trae modulaciones, pitch shifters, cosas por el estilo. Eso ya debe estar en lo que es el editor, y que el amplificador pues viene pues ahora sí que con todo el poder de Helix, y que se puede incluso complementar con algún procesador en lo que es el FX loop del amplificador, complementando el sonido, y pues ahora sí que puedes tener el resultado tal cual como si tuvieras un Helix en un amplificador.
Pues mi buen Edu, hemos llegado al final. No sé si nos da tiempo de una última pregunta, si la gente tiene alguna pregunta, o concluimos. I think Edu is having
friend, and we'll
troubles.
See if there's more questions from the audience. There's Roger Williams, Dorothy.
Okay, we don't have any questions, so bueno, Leo Gutierrez is saying very interesting program. Congratulations to everyone. So Eric, we now have reached the end of our live stream. So to close, maybe you want to add something to wrap up, and something that you would like to share, final thoughts with the audience.
Also, I have one little tiny scoop. when we're finished with all of the models and features of a particular update or product, we call it feature complete. That means that everything after that is all bug fixes and beta testing.
Okay.
So the new update for Helix and HX and Helix Native is 3.2, and that today went feature complete. So
Today. Okay. That's awesome. No,
So,
Edu, si quieres
big
comentarlo.
news. Everybody's happy.
Big
You guys,
news.
you guys get the scoop.
Ok, nos está dejando un último comentario. Eric nos está diciendo que la nueva actualización para todos los productos HELIX, HELIX Floor, HX Stomp, etcétera, es la versión 3.2 y que es la prueba. Básicamente es el upgrade que se pone como prueba, el beta, y cuando este upgrade queda completado le llaman el feature complete, ¿sí? Y entonces esta versión nueva de upgrade la terminaron justo hoy y pues en los próximos días estará comenzando el periodo de prueba que generalmente viene después otro pequeño upgrade donde ya se arreglan bugs y cosas por el estilo. Está llegando Julio Revueltas con una petición.
Sí.
Okay, there's an important musician in Mexico named Julio Revueltas who is endorsed by Yamaha Mexico
All right.
for Line 6. A good friend of mine and an amazing guitar player. He have played with the greatest, Steve Vai and guys like this. Ok, una petición que por favor pongan en una página de la Helix el nombre de los presets en grande. Pues serviría como un setlist en vivo en lugar de verlo en un papel pegado.
Se refiere a una página del Helix, se refiere a la pantalla.
Oh, ok, ya entendí. Ok, this friend, he says as a petition.
Yes, or a suggestion.
Helix have on the screen you have the main screen or the menu when you scroll and see all included on Helix, etc. Or the set lists where you select your set list and enter to the certain preset. Okay, this friend says it's a petition to please add a page in Helix or in the preset where you can see the name of the preset in big
letters.
So
Okay.
multiple presets or just one preset?
No, just one preset. So because he says that it will work better on a live situation on a stage, so he can see in the distance the name of the preset and not in tiny letters.
Yes,
So-
and he also says so you can get rid of the typical paper written in marker with the song
On the set list.
Yes.
So pressing the presets button, seeing the list of the presets, you just want that bigger.
Yes, one by one, no? So the
One by one.
one
Okay.
by one.
It's just a petition.
All right, I'm writing it
Yes,
down.
Yes.
Listo, Julio. So,
Listo.
okay, we're done with this second round with Eric.
Yes, so we are very, very grateful to Eric. Thank you very much for being with us once more, for interacting with our audience. Of course, thank you to Edu to conduct this second part. And thanks to our audience, many Helix users, Line 6 users, and there's Danny Maldino there. Excellent information. Greetings to all. And Julio Revuelta say thank you also. So Eric, thank you once again. We've been honored to have you here.
No, thank you guys for the opportunity. It's always fun. You guys are really cool. So
For the next time, Eric, make sure to bring a couple of beers and let's party,
All right.
man.
Well, if you guys bust out the beer, I'll go grab one right now. So
I'm not sure. I think I have a trooper now in my fridge, but it works well.
yeah.
So next time, let's have a party with. Todos están invitados a la siguiente que hagamos con Eric o con gente de Line 6. Tráiganse una cerveza. Dani, saludos hermanito. Julio, gracias por tu comentario, bro. And Eric, once again, thank you very much for your time. And thanks to Nick, to Guillermo, and to everybody. I know there are some other guys at Line 6 who are watching us right now. Guys, I miss you all, and hopefully we can have another chat in the near future.
All right. Good to see you guys.
Thanks to Yamaha Mexico, Yamaha Guitars Mexico, Line 6 Mexico, all the people at Yamaha de Mexico. And see you next time. As always, every Wednesday, 21 hours at night. GuitarraMX Conectado. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, amigos.
Bye-bye.
Let's go backstage.